Hello, welcome to my channel, everyone. Today I'm really excited to show you how to knit my Brightbay sweater tee. It's a great classic t-shirt design, and I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about it before we get started, but be sure to grab your pattern copy. You can click the link in the video description or head to my website, ashleylillis.com. And it'll give you a link. You can purchase this either on Etsy or Ravelry, but it's great because once you have the printed PDF of the pattern, you can follow along with me in this video tutorial, and I will show you exactly how to knit this awesome sweater tee. So first of all, it's knit from the top down, and you're gonna start by casting on stitches at the top of the neckline, and then you'll increase for the shoulders, and you increase for the shoulders, and then you knit straight, you break the yarn, and then you start by picking up stitches for the left front, and you knit the left front, and then you knit the right front, you join at the neckline, and then you do increases for the underarm for the front, and then you join in the round and knit the body. I know that might sound a little confusing, but don't worry. Again, I'm gonna walk you through how to do everything step by step. This is really fun. So just to explain a little bit about sizing, I have this in a ton of different sizes, and I do my sizing like 1 through 8 or 1 through 10 or 1 through 12, size 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you know, like that. I don't do extra small, small, medium, large, because that means different things to different people in different brands. So what I like you to do is please pay attention to the finished bust circumference to figure out what makes sense for you. So I am a 37-inch bust, and I knit this in 2 different sizes. I wanted a tee that was a little smaller and then one that was a little bit bigger. So I knit this in a size 3. This is the size 3. This is the smaller size. And I also knit this in a size 4. I'll try this on for you guys too so you can see how the bigger size fits as well. But this size fits great. It is meant to be a little cropped here. I don't like my tees to sit real long on me, but you can, again, feel free to try this on as you go, as you knit, and you can see how long you want to make this. So it has a set-in sleeve, and this allows the tee to fit a little bit more tailored on you, and it has this shaping that allows for your top, that allows room for the top of your shoulder. So it allows it to just sit a little bit better on you. The sleeves are picked up and knit in the round, but first you do a series of short rows to create this awesome shoulder cap. I use the German short row method in my video tutorial, and I referenced that in the pattern. You do not have to use the German short row method. You can do a traditional wrap and turn if you would like. Just replace that with where I do the German short row shaping. So that's all about the tee. I hope you guys enjoy the pattern. I hope you guys enjoy making the sweater along with me. Hold on, I will try on the other size for you so you can see how it fits, but here's this size one more time. Here's the next size up. You can see it's just a little bit roomier at the underarm. It's just bigger in the bust, but I find with the cotton yarn, I really love just the drape of this yarn and the way it sits. Just note and pay attention to gauge with your row count. Sometimes cotton yarn can drape a little bit longer than wool yarn, or again, it just depends on your fiber content and how everything sits. So please be sure to check your gauge, and let's get knitting. So what you're gonna need, I used Lion Brand Kobu, and this yarn is a 51% cotton and 49% bamboo, and it has, you can just see it's about 3.5 ounces, 100 grams, 232 yards, 212 meters. It is considered a lightweight yarn here. So what you're gonna wanna do is click the link in the video description to grab your copy of the pattern. It's got everything that you need. It's got the yardage. I knit both of these with about 3 skeins of yarn. That was enough. You're gonna need a tape measure. You're gonna need scissors. You're obviously gonna need the yarn, and you're gonna check the pattern for the needle sizes. You're gonna need some removable stitch markers and some permanent stitch markers, or you could actually use these as well. You're gonna need a tapestry needle, and I love to use this hollow tubing for putting my stitches instead of using waste yarn, I use this. I'll link this in the video description as well. I got this on Amazon, and this also will help you try the sweater on as you go. What's great about this, it's knit from the top down, so you can try the sweater on as you go and figure out how long you want the body to be. So when we get started here, we start by casting on stitches for the back of the neck here. And then we'll make increases. So we're working from the top down. We're working from the top of the back of the neck down. We'll make a series of increases for the shoulders, knit straight, then increase for the underarms. And then we'll flip the work over and knit the left and the right front. So we're gonna just get started first by casting on stitches for the back of the neck here. So reference your pattern and the size you're knitting, and you're gonna use a long tail cast on to cast on stitches for the back of the neck. I am just going to tie a simple slip knot here, place it on my needle, and make sure that the tail is in front of me, and I'm going to do a long tail cast on. The first slip knot counts as the very first stitch. So I'm going to go under the yarn around my thumb, over the yarn around my index finger, and pull through. Now I have 2 stitches cast on. So you're going to continue casting on using the long tail cast on method until you have the number of stitches that your size calls for. So I've cast on all the stitches I'm supposed to cast on for the back of the neck, the top of the back. I'm going to turn the work now, and I am going to purl back. Now we're on row 1 of the back, and we're just going to purl to the end. All right, I finished purling to the end. Now I'm going to turn the work and begin a row 2. Now we're going to be making increases at the beginning and at the end of the rows, and then when we turn the work, we're going to be doing increases as well. So we're making 2 increases on the right side and 2 increases on the left side. And these increases are 4 stitches in from the end. So the pattern says to knit 4. So we're going to knit 4 stitches. And now we're going to make one left. We're going to make 1 stitch that leans to the left on the right side. And we do this by inserting the left hand needle from front to the back in the stitch in between. And then you knit through the back of the stitch. We're basically making sure the stitch is twisted, and we're making sure it leans a certain direction. So that's how you make 1 left on the right side. Then the pattern says to knit until you get to 4 stitches to the end. So we're going to knit across, and we're going to stop when we have 4 stitches left. I have 4 stitches left on my left hand needle. Now we're going to make one right by inserting the needle from back to the front in the stitch in between the stitches and knitting it through the front so the stitch is twisted the right way and it leans to the right. And then you knit to the end. So now we've increased 2 stitches for this first increase row. And again, we've got an increase that leans to the left, 4 stitches in over here, and an increase that leans to the right for, after when you have 4 stitches to the end. So now we're going to turn the work, and you're going to be doing the same thing, but we are doing it on the wrong side of the work. So the stitches are a little different. We're going to be purling 4 stitches. And then we are going to make one left on the wrong side of the work. So when you make one left on the wrong side of the work, you're going to insert the left needle from back to the front, and then you purl through the front stitch. It's a little difficult to get started at the beginning here. You'll get the hang of it. And then you're gonna purl till you have 4 stitches left. So I've purled across. I have 4 stitches left. Now I'm going to make one right on the wrong side. And when you make one that leans to the right on the wrong side, you insert the left hand needle from front to back in that bar in between the stitches, front to back, and then you purl through the back loop. Again, it can be a little tricky, especially on smaller needles at the beginning, and then you just purl through the back, and then you purl to the end. So now you've successfully increased on the right side and the wrong side. So you're going to continue repeating those increases until you have the number of stitches you're supposed to have for your size. I'll show you guys one more time. Now you can start to see the work forming a little bit. We've got stitches that are starting to lean the other direction, so you can start to see the shoulder shaping. So we will continue knitting 4 on the right side. Make one left, insert the needle from front to back in between those stitches in the bar, and knit through the back. Then you knit across till you'll have 4 stitches left. When I've knit across and I have 4 stitches left, I'm going to make one right by inserting the needle from back to front in between this topmost bar, which can be difficult to see. So it's basically the bar in between the stitches that's on the top. Go from back to the front and you knit through the front. So that stitch is twisted and leans the correct way. Sometimes I push the stitch so I can get my needle in there. So I'll knit that, and then you knit to the end. Looks like my stitch split there, just making sure I've got everything. So I knit to the end, turn the work. So now we're on the wrong side, and we need to make our increases on the wrong side. So we purl 4 stitches now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we make one left on the wrong side by inserting the needle from back to the front and purling through that front bar to make sure that stitch is twisted in the right direction. Then we purl across till we have 4 stitches left. Once I've purled all the way across and I've got 4 stitches left, I need to now make one right on the wrong side. So I need to insert the left hand needle from front to back under this bar in between the stitches. And then I need to purl it through the back loop, which means I stick my needle this way through the back, and I purl through that, and then I just purl to the end. I'll show you what it looks like now. You'll start to be able to see the back shaping. It creates this really neat look, and there we go. So now we can start to see the back shaping taking place, the shoulder shaping on the back. So you're just going to continue now making the increases on the right side and the wrong side until you have the number of stitches you're supposed to have for your size. I've finished my shoulder shaping, so I've done my increases until I've reached the amount of stitches, the increases I'm supposed to get to for my size. And I should end after a purl row, so my work is facing the right side. And now the pattern says to work stockinette stitch for a certain number of rows. So all you're gonna do is knit on the right side, so knit all the way across on the right side of the work. So you knit all the way across, and then when you get to the end, you just turn the work and you will purl all of the way back. So that is stockinette stitch when you're knitting flat, back and forth. You knit on the right side of the work and you purl on the wrong side of the work. So just continue stockinette stitch for the number of rows or length that the pattern specifies for your size, and just be sure you finish your stockinette stitch after you've completed a wrong side row so the right side of the work is facing you. All right, I've just completed my last stockinette row. So now I'm facing the right side. Here's what the work is looking like right now. So now you can see where we've cast on for the back of the neck. We've made our shoulder increases. We've knit straight. And then now we need to start increasing for the underarms. So we're going to be increasing similarly on the right side to what we did up here for the shoulders. We will only be increasing on the right side. We will not be increasing on the wrong side. So we're at the part of the pattern where it says begin increasing for the underarms. So we are going to knit 4. Then we're going to make 1 left, insert the needle from front to back, knit through the back. Then you're going to knit across until you have 4 stitches left. And then when you have 4 stitches left, you are going to make 1 right by inserting the needle from back to front in that bar in between those stitches and knitting it through that front stitch there. And then you just knit to the end. And when you are finished with that row, you turn the work and you're simply going to just purl all of the way across the row. So, like I said, it's similar to the increases for the shoulder. However, we are only increasing on the right side. So it gives us a more gradual increase. So it'll look a little different than what the shoulders look like. So you're going to purl all the way back. And once you're finished purling all the way across, turn the work again. And you'll just repeat that previous row where you did a make 1 left and a make 1 right. So you'll continue increasing until you get to the specific amount of stitches you are supposed to reach for your size. I've just finished all of my increases for the underarms, and this is what the back is looking like at this point. I've ended after I've completed a wrong side row. And since we are at the point now where we are done making all of our increases, we can take a tapestry needle and a piece of waste yarn, and we're going to move all of these stitches that are on this needle onto a piece of waste yarn. First, I'm going to make sure I cut my yarn. We're going to break the yarn. The pattern says to break the yarn. I'm going to leave a small tail here. We'll be able to weave that in later. And I'm going to break the yarn. And then now I'm going to place all of these stitches on a piece of waste yarn. I usually like to use a piece of yarn that's a different color so it's easier to see. But all you're simply going to do is make sure your stitches are sitting on your left needle and then just move them off onto this tapestry needle like this, slowly moving them all over. And at this point, I just want to mention, make sure you're keeping the stitches facing the same direction that they were on the needle. This is where some people can have some issues with getting the stitches twisted. So I'm literally just keeping them facing the same direction, and I'm slipping them off very carefully, making sure I don't drop any stitches. And I'm slowly pushing them over onto this tapestry needle. Again, they're facing the same direction on my waste yarn as they are on the needle. So you want to go in this direction, and then when we pick them back up, we're gonna take our needle and put them back on going this way as well. So something to keep in mind, so just make sure you're slipping your stitches off correctly so that they are facing the same direction, and then you just continue to push them onto the piece of waste yarn so they can just rest here. This is just a placeholder that will allow us to use this needle while these stitches just sit on a piece of scrap yarn or waste yarn until we're ready to work them again. So we have finished the point of the back where we're done knitting back and forth. We're going to knit the fronts, and then we'll join the back and the front. So just keep placing them on the piece of waste yarn and sliding the stitches down. All right, I've got all of my stitches now on this piece of waste yarn. I'm just going to pull the yarn so that I make sure I have enough tail on this side, and you've got a long enough tail on this side so that the stitches will sit comfortably on this piece of waste yarn. So we have completed the back to the point where it's now time to work on the fronts. So this is the back of the neck here. So I'm gonna turn my work like this, and we're gonna start working the left front now. The left front means the left side as if you were wearing it, not as if you were looking at it. So if I were to put this on right now, my left front would be right here. If I'm standing behind the camera here, this is the right front. So we're gonna work the left front first, because when we work the right front, we're gonna when we're done working the right front, we're gonna join everything in the round starting over here. So we're gonna work the left front first, then work the right front and join everything together. So we are going to pick up stitches now at the back of the neck for the left front, and we are going to make sure here that we pick up stitches along this shoulder line. So we're not going to pick up a stitch for every row here. We're going to pick up about 3 stitches for every 4 rows here across the shoulder. The pattern gives you a stitch count to make sure you pick up. I know everybody picks up stitches a little differently, so it's approximately 3 stitches for every 4 rows, but the most important thing is just to make sure you're picking up the correct number of stitches. So for the left front, you're going to start at the top of the shoulder here, making sure you're picking up stitches in that last stitch there on the end. And you can see you're going to be going through this last stitch here to pick up stitches. So I'm going to join my yarn simply by bringing my yarn up and over, and I'm going to pull this through. This first stitch is always the hardest. So I've picked up and I've knit my first stitch now. So I've picked up 1 stitch. I'm gonna make sure I'm using the correct end of the yarn. We will weave in this tail, but if it gets loose, you can just kind of hold it. 2, and then I skip a row and 3. So that's 3 stitches for 4 rows. And again, I just need to make sure I'm picking up 20 stitches here. So that's 3 stitches. I'm gonna go 4. Make sure you can see where I'm going through. 5. Skip a row now. Skip this row. 6. 7. 8. Skip a row. 9, 10, 11, skip a row, 12, 13, 14, skip a row, 16, 17, 18, skip a row, 19, 20. All right, so for my size, I was supposed to pick up that number of stitches. So you basically just work till you've picked up the number of stitches you're supposed to pick up, trying to get as close to 3 stitches for every 4 rows as possible, you know. But the point is you're picking up a specific number of stitches along the shoulder line here, across the back here. And now we are going to work a number of stockinette stitch rows for the number of rows that the pattern calls for. So I'm going to turn the work and just purl back and continue purling on the wrong side and knitting on the right side for the number of rows that the pattern calls for. Okay, I have just finished a wrong side row on the stockinette, so you should be ready to work on the right side now. But this is the point where we're going to take a removable stitch marker, and if you look at the work, this is going to become the neckline, and this is the outside of the work. We're going to mark the end of the shoulder cap in the previous row we just knit. This will help us with our short row shaping for our sleeves. So I'm just going to place a removable stitch marker at that point so I know where my sleeve cap will end. And when we work our short row shaping later, that'll just help us mark where we work our short rows. So we're just going to ignore that removable stitch marker right now. We're just going to keep it on our work. But now we are going to begin increasing for the neckline. So we've worked straight here, and now we need to increase at the neckline to start to help shape the neckline and have it start curving around. So to work the neckline shaping, you're going to want to make sure again that you are on the right side of the work. And we're simply going to just knit 3 stitches. And then you're going to make 1 left by inserting the needle from front to back and knitting through the back. And then you're just going to knit to the end. And when you get to the end, you're going to turn the work and just purl back. And then you turn the work, and you're going to repeat the same thing. You're going to knit 3 and make 1 left, and I'll just start to show you what the neckline looks like. Knit 3, make 1 left, insert the needle from front to back, and knit through the back. Easier said than done sometimes, especially with cotton yarn or yarn that splits easily. You just have to be careful. Okay, and then you just knit to the end again and purl back. So that's the 2-row repeat. So as you can see a little bit here, the work is starting to curve this way as we expand and increase our stitches along the neckline. So you're just going to keep repeating those 2 rows until you get to the number of stitches and make the number of increases you're supposed to make for your size. And you're going to want to make sure you end after a wrong side row. All right, I've completed the number of increases I'm supposed to complete for my left front for the neckline. And I've got the appropriate amount of stitches I'm supposed to have. So I'm actually going to cut the yarn, and we're going to place these stitches on a piece of waste yarn again to hold these left front stitches. So I've got the work on my left hand needle, and I'm just going to slide them off again using my tapestry needle and a piece of waste yarn. So same thing we did before, making sure the stitches aren't twisted or facing the wrong direction. Just make sure they stay facing the same way. Okay, I'm going to drop my needle. I'm going to pull the yarn through and make sure it's all sitting nicely on this piece of scrap yarn. So I'll just show you what it's looking like now. We've got the back done here. We've got the left front complete. We've picked up our stitches along the shoulder here. So now we're going to do the same thing on this side, picking up the same amount of stitches we're going to pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows approximately. This time though, we'll need to start on the outside and work our way this way because you pick up stitches in this direction, moving towards the left. So you'll just want to make sure you count and make sure you have enough room to pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows on the outside. So find where the shoulder ends here and you can start to pick up stitches along the outside edge. Same way we did before. You can just hold the tail so you don't drop the stitch there. And again, it's just 2, I pick up 2 stitches, skip a row, pick up the 3rd stitch. And again, we're just working from the outside in. So that's 3, 4, 5, skip a row, 6, 7, 8, skip a row, 9, 10, and so on. All right, I've got all my stitches picked up. Again, just make sure it's okay if it's not perfectly 3 stitches for every 4 rows, especially if you're trying to like finagle the last few stitches. The most important part is to make sure you have the correct number of stitches. So you're going to turn the work again and work stockinette stitch for the same number of rows that you did on the left front, and then I'll show you how to increase for the neckline on the right front. All right, when you're done knitting stockinette to the length you're supposed to for the right front before you do the neckline shaping, don't forget to mark your previous row on the outside edge to mark that sleeve cap. You can just place a removable stitch marker right there on that last row. You're going to want to make sure you end the stockinette after a wrong side row, so the right side of the work is facing you. So you can now begin the neckline shaping. So on the left side, we did the increase at the beginning of the row to create the neckline shaping to go in this direction. Now, when we work the right front, we're going to be doing the increases or making the neckline shaping at the end of the row because we're working in opposite of what we did for the left side. They're mirror images. So to begin the increases for the neckline, you're going to knit across 3 stitches until the end. So when you have 3 stitches left, you'll stop, and then we will make 1 right. So I've knit across, I've got 3 stitches left. Now I'm going to make 1 right by inserting the needle from back to front and knitting through the front here. And then you just knit to the end. And just turn the work. And you just purl back. So that's the 2-row repeat. So again, it's just opposite of what we did on the other side. You're going to be making the same number of increases. So you end up with the same number of stitches on the right front. So I'll meet you back here when it's time to join the left and right fronts, and I'll show you how to do that. So now I finished the right front. I've increased to the number of stitches I'm supposed to have for the right front. So now you can see that we've got our neckline shaped here. So what we're gonna do is start knitting across the right front, cast on stitches for the base of the neckline, and then put these stitches, the left side stitches, back on our needle, and then join the fronts by just continuing to knit across. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that right now. So you're simply going to start by, and when you finish the stockinette on the right front, make sure you finish after a wrong side row so you have the right side facing you so you can start knitting across. So you're simply just going to start knitting across the right front. I've knit across the right front. Now I'm going to reference my pattern and look at how many stitches I'm supposed to cast on for the base of the neckline. So I'm going to cast on using the backwards loop method. You can cast on however you'd like to cast on. The backwards loop method is literally just making a backwards loop and slipping the stitch onto the work. So that's 1, 2, and you basically are twisting it so that you can knit into the stitch. So you just turn it, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have all of my stitches cast on for the base of the neckline here. So I'm going to set this down, and at this point, I've got this over here. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to take my left-hand needle now and starting at the outside of the work in, making sure that my stitches continue to face the same direction. I am simply going to put these stitches back on the needle so I can work these stitches now. Again, most important thing is to make sure you are not twisting your stitches when you knit them. So I like to just make sure I'm keeping my stitches the same direction. And you just have to be careful when you're working with circular needles. It can get confusing, like which direction things are going and all that jazz. So right now, again, all we're doing is joining the left and right fronts. Eventually, we're going to be joining the front and the back too. So I usually like to just put all of my stitches on the needle and then pull the waste yarn out. So I'm nearing the end here. I'm going to slide these through so I can get this waste yarn out a little bit more easily that way. Okay, and then I'm going to push these back up towards the edge because we're going to be joining. So now I've got my left front stitches on my left needle. I've knit across the right front, cast on my stitches, and now I'm simply going to join this by just knitting. So make sure you've got your yarn here and you're simply going to start knitting across. Now you've got a tail here at the very first stitch, so you might need to pull that. So I'm just going to pull the tail here a little bit. I might hold it as I knit the first couple of stitches here. And then I'm simply going to just keep knitting all the way across the left front now, making sure everything is looking good. So these will probably be a little loose, these cast on stitches, depending on how you cast on. They'll tighten up as you continue to work, and then you're going to end up picking up these stitches and doing the collar ribbing. So just keep knitting all the way across. One quick thing I wanted to mention is just make sure you have your cast on stitches not twisted here, that they're, you can see the bottom and it's all facing one direction. Sometimes they can get twisted. Okay, so now you've knit across the front and you've got the right and left fronts joined. Now the pattern tells you to knit stockinette stitch for a certain number of rows. So now you're going to be working back and forth across all of these stitches. Check your stitch count at this point just to make sure you've got the appropriate number of stitches. And we're just going to turn the work. And we are going to purl back. Again, just make sure these cast on stitches are not twisted here. I'm going to push everything up so I can easily purl. And I'll show you how to work these cast on stitches because they can be a little difficult. And just know, it might look a little funny for the first few rows, but as you get going, everything tightens up a little bit. So just keep that in mind. So just purl all the way across now, and I'll just show you what it looks like to purl those cast on stitches. Okay, when you get to those cast on stitches, just be careful that, first of all, that you don't drop those stitches. Now this will be kind of loose because that's a tail again, so you can just pull that. Gets a little wonky here, but don't worry, it starts to look better. Okay, so it might look like it's really loose, but it'll tighten up. Okay, so when you purl these stitches, you need to make sure you're going into the stitch correctly so that it stays twisted. So you're just going to purl like this and just work very carefully, making sure you're not dropping these stitches. It's not the easiest to work into if you cast on this way. So just continue to work these stitches. You're gonna purl all the way across and purl all the way to the end. So I've just finished purling this first row of stockinette, and you can see that the cast on stitches look a little wonky, but you'll just turn the work and continue knitting the stockinette the length you're supposed to, the amount of rows you're supposed to, and you'll just knit these stitches now normally as if you would anything else. So just keep working now for your straight stockinette, and then I'll meet you back here when it's time to increase for the underarms on the front. So I've completed stockinette stitch for the number of rows I'm supposed to complete after joining the left front and the right front. And now we're at the point where it's time to increase for the underarms. Just as we did on the back here, we're going to be doing the same thing and increasing for the underarms. At the front, you'll be doing the same number of increases. So just reference your pattern again for your size, and I'm just going to show you how to complete these increases. Again, same thing you did before on the back. I'll just show you one more time. So you are going to knit 4, then you will make 1 left, and then you're going to knit until you have 4 stitches left. When you have 4 stitches left, you make 1 right, inserting the needle from back to the front and knitting through the front, and then you'll just knit to the end. And remember, when we do the underarm increases, we're only increasing on the right side, so we'll turn the work now, and we will just purl all the way back. So that's how you do the underarm increases for the front. So when you've completed the number of increases and you're at the stitch count you're supposed to be for your size, then I'll show you how to join the front and the back. I'll see you back here when I am done making the increases for the underarm on the front. I've completed the front underarm increases to the number of stitches I'm supposed to have for the front now. I've ended after a wrong side row, so I'm ready to knit a right side row. I am now going to join the front and the back, and we are going to place these back stitches back on this needle using the left hand needle so that we can join the work in the round and knit all the way in the round. So to do that, you're going to make sure your stitches are up on the left hand needle like this, and you're going to take what will be the right hand needle, even though it's on the left side right now, and get these stitches back on so we can join the work in the round. And the best way to visualize this is to figure out how these stitches need to be on the needle so that you can knit in a continuous circle. So I just have my work laying like this. I have my stitches pushed up on my left hand needle. I'm going to take the other end and put the stitches on starting over here now, because this is what will allow me to join the work in the round. So I am going to just start putting these stitches on this needle like this so that the work can be joined in the round. And you're going to be casting on stitches at the underarm just like we did for the bottom of the neckline to help join the work. So I'm going to finish putting these stitches on, and then I'll show you how to join the work in the round. I'm almost done getting all these back stitches on the needle here. Just need to pull out the waste yarn now. Just gonna slide them over so I can get the waste yarn out. So now I have my front stitches and my back stitches on the same needle. Now I am going to actually connect them, and I am just going to simply start by knitting across the front stitches. So even though I've got all of the stitches on, I'm just going to start knitting across the front of the work on the right side. Once you get to the end of the front, you're going to join to the back the similar way you did the neckline and join the left and right fronts. You're going to reference the pattern and cast on the number of stitches you're supposed to cast on at the underarm for your size. For my case, it's 2 stitches. And then we're simply going to start knitting across the back. And again, remember, it can be a little wonky, especially we've got a tail here, so you might want to hold that. You can hold that and simply just start knitting across the back. I'm gonna pull the stitches a little bit here, tighten that up. You can just start knitting all the way across the back. Once you've finished knitting across the back, it'll be time to join the back and the front. You'll cast on the same number of stitches that you cast on the other side to join the front to the back. But this time you'll need to grab a stitch marker and place the stitch marker halfway between the stitches that you cast on. If you have an odd number of stitches, just do as close to the number of the center of stitches as possible. So if you have 5 stitches you're supposed to cast on, you could put the stitch marker after the second stitch before the third stitch. So I'm supposed to cast on 2 stitches, so I'm going to cast on 1, place my stitch marker to denote the beginning and the end of the round, cast on my second stitch, and then continue knitting. So now you're going to continue knitting in the round, just doing stockinette stitch, which is just knitting every single round. You're going to be slipping that beginning of round stitch marker until the length the pattern specifies. So just be careful when you're knitting those cast on stitches again at the underarm to just go into those stitches carefully. So you'll knit to the length that you would like the sweater to be. Feel free to try it on if you'd like by placing the stitches on a knitting extension cord or a piece of waste yarn to see how it's fitting. The bottom ribbing will be about 1 inch long, so just make sure if you're adjusting things, you're taking into account the added 1 inch length in the bottom ribbing. So now all you're going to do is knit stockinette stitch for a while. Just wanted to show you what it looks like to knit those first underarm stitches. So when you get to those cast on stitches, just be careful that you don't drop the stitches. So you can see my cast on stitches there. I'm just going to insert the needle this way very carefully. Knit that stitch, and again it looks loose, but that's okay. Knit this second stitch and then continue knitting. I can pull the tail to tighten things up on this side, and then you just keep on knitting. When you are done or nearing the end of a skein of yarn, I just wanted to show you how to join the second skein. What's great is this Lion Brand Kobo yarn, it lasts a while. This is just, the yardage is great. This is just 1 skein. So I simply just join by double knitting a few stitches. So you take the end of your new skein and you kind of double it up here with the end of your other one. So you've got 2 pieces of yarn here, and then I hold both strands together here, leave a tail with the new skein, and I just double knit like 3 or 4 stitches. I'm going to do 4 stitches. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And I usually typically try to join like on the side of the work and not like front and center. You won't really see the double stitches here. And then once you've done 4 stitches, you drop the old skein back there and you just continue knitting with the new one. So the back of the work will look like this. You've got the old one and the new one joined right in the back here, and you can just trim this and weave in any more ends if you want. So that's how I join my yarn. And then when you come back around, you just treat the 2 stitches as if they were 1. So just make sure you just knit those 2 pieces of yarn as if they were 1 stitch when you come back around. Okay, I've completed the body to the length I am supposed to for my size. You measure from the underarm down, so you can take your tape measure and just measure from the underarm down. And this is the point where you probably want to try on the sweater tee to see if you like the length, because we're at the point now where we're going to move on to the body ribbing, and the body ribbing will add another inch, but that's it. If you want the sweater to be a little longer than the extra inch that you're supposed to add, I would suggest trying it on, see how it fits if you added 1 more inch. And what you can do to try on the sweater is to use this knitting extension cord and slip the stitches on there to see how it's fitting you. So when it's time to begin knitting the body, you are going to just simply start doing a knit 1, purl 1. I'm just finishing the round. I wanted to mention with the body ribbing, you're going to want to switch to the next size down needle size so that your ribbing is a little bit tighter. So I have interchangeable needles, so I just swapped needle size. If you don't have interchangeable needles, what you want to do for the first round is just take a second, your other needle, and you'll just knit the stitches onto the smaller size needle off of the larger size needle. So you'll just knit around where you'll move all the stitches from your left hand needle on the original needle onto the right hand needle, which will be your new needle. And once you finish the round, all of your stitches will be on that smaller needle size. So you can do your first round of ribbing like that. So just wanted to mention that. Or if you have interchangeable needles, you can just swap out the needles before you begin your ribbing. So just wanted to mention that. So to do the body ribbing, we'll just do a knit 1, purl 1, all the way around. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. When you've completed the first round of ribbing, you'll just slip the marker, and then we'll just knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches. So you're going to continue this 1 by 1 rib until the ribbing measures about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, and then we will bind off. So I'll see you back here once my ribbing is about 1 inch long. All right, I've completed my ribbing to be about 1 inch here, and now I'm going to show you how to bind off. So once I get to the end of the round and I'm ready to bind off, I'm going to slip the stitch marker, and we're binding off in 1 by 1 rib, which means we need to maintain the 1 by 1 rib stitch, the knit 1, purl 1, as we bind off. So you start the 1 by 1 rib bind off by knitting 1, purling 1, and then you slip that first stitch over the stitch we just purled. You'll slip this off, and then you'll continue the rib. You'll knit 1, bind 1 off, then you will purl 1, bind 1 off. And you just keep slipping that first stitch over the second stitch. So you should never have more than 1 stitch as you bind off over here. So you'll have 2, and then you'll bind off to 1, and then you'll work the next stitch. So that's purl, bind off, knit, bind off. And there's many different ways to bind off. This is just kind of a standard bind off. It's great for beginners. I like to just bind off this way. Feel free to bind off however you'd like, but just be careful that you are maintaining that 1x1 rib as you bind off. So once you work all the way around and you have 1 stitch left, I'll show you what to do. I'm almost done binding off here. I have a few more stitches to bind off until I have 1 stitch left. So I've got my final 2 stitches. I'm going to bind off this last stitch. All right, so I'm going to cut a little bit of a tail, I don't know, maybe about 6 inches, and then I'm going to just pull this yarn through. And now we just need to join the ends and finish off that tail. Slip that stitch marker off my needle here. I'm going to take my tapestry needle and thread this through here. And now I'm just going to kind of join the work. I'm going to go back through here and just connect both sides. And then we can go through, and on the reverse side here we can just pull the stitch through, and then we're going to just work up the leg of a stitch here to weave in our ends. So I just usually go up the leg of a stitch here all the way through the rest of the ribbing, pull this through, loosen it up a little bit, and then you can just snip the tail here. And you've got your work woven in. This is where I joined yarn, so I can go back through later and finish all that off, but now you've got the bottom ribbing complete. Now that we have the body done, we're gonna do the collar. You can actually do the collar before you finish the body if you'd like. You can do the sleeves and the collar before you actually finish the body. So you could put the work down after you connect the body and work the collar. But I do like to work the collar before I do the sleeves, because you can try it on with the collar and it'll just sit on you the way it's supposed to sit. So then when you start working the sleeves, you could try on the work just to see how it's fitting. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up stitches for the collar and do a 1x1 rib. I went down to my needle size 1, and I'm using 16-inch circular needles for this. I'm going to pick up stitches starting in the center of the back. I'm going to insert my needle through the top. It doesn't need to be exactly the center. You can just kind of guesstimate, and I am going to start by picking up stitches. And to start picking up stitches, I simply just join the work like this, wrap my yarn through, and pick up my stitch carefully. And you can just kind of hold the tail as you start to work. So that's 1 stitch. 2nd stitch. I'm picking up 1 stitch for every stitch. So when we work horizontally with the work, you pick up a stitch for every stitch. When we work perpendicularly to the work, we're going to pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows. So I'm just working across the back of the collar here, picking up every stitch. I'm just inserting my needle through that top bar. And wrapping the yarn up and over my needle and pulling through, making sure the yarn is in that direction so that when I start to work and when I start to knit, the stitches will be facing the correct direction. So I insert the needle, pull the yarn up and over, and pull it through. It takes a little practice to get this. Just be patient with it. Again, we're going in through those top two bars here, working all the way across half of the neckline. Okay, I've gotten to the part where I'm at the left front neckline here, and I'm gonna pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows here. So I'm going to work across that shoulder here. We're actually still, here we go. Now I'm at the point where I am going to pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows down that left front neckline. We're going to insert our needle to pick up stitches in through that very last stitch. There will be 2 bars, so I'm going to go 1, 2, skip a row, 3. And that's 3 stitches for every 4 rows. 1, 2, skip a row, 3. 1, 2, skip a row, 3. All right, so we're going to continue all the way down till we get to the part where we cast on for the bottom neckline. All right, I've picked up 3 stitches for every 4 rows along that left neckline. Now I'm at the bottom where I cast on, so I'm going to pick up a stitch for every stitch here, working through that loop where we cast on. And you'll see we'll go through that first bump where we cast on and then go through that second leg and pull that through. So we're going to pick up every stitch along the bottom neckline. All right, I've picked up every stitch for every stitch along. I've picked up a stitch for every stitch along the neckline. It might be a little wonky where you join the yarn over here, but just know that you'll have this tail. You can pull the tail and weave it in and kind of fix any gaps. So now up the right neckline, you will do the same thing where you pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows here. 1, 2, skip a row, 3, 1, 2, skip a row, 3, all the way up till you get to the neckline again, and then you'll pick up a stitch for every stitch and we'll join the work in the round. All right, I'm almost done picking up stitches here. I'm going to pick up 1 more stitch. So you are supposed to pick up an even number of stitches, and instead of counting if I'm off by a stitch, I will just do a purl 2 together on my 1 by 1 rib. So I'll show you how I do that if I'm off. So instead of counting that I have an even number of stitches, I'm just going to place my stitch marker here, and I'm going to start my 1 by 1 rib now. So we just knit 1, purl 1, all the way around, knit 1, purl 1. And you can use 16-inch, let me just mention, these are 16-inch needles for the collar. I am knitting a size 3. For some of the larger sizes, you'll have more stitches, so you can move up to 24-inch circular needles if you would like. I am just using 16-inch circular needles. So like I said, you'll just do knit 1, purl 1 all the way around. And then once we get towards the end, we can see if we've picked up an even or odd number of stitches and then correct as we go if we have the wrong number of stitches. So I will see you back here when I'm nearing the end of my first round of 1 by 1 rib for the collar. Nearing the end of my first round here. Let's see. Oh, I actually did end up picking up an even number of stitches because I just finished a purl stitch. Next is a knit, then I have a purl stitch. But if I ended up having 3 stitches left, I would have just purled 2 together to decrease a stitch. That's how you purl 2 together, and you wouldn't even notice. But I have the appropriate number of stitches, luckily, so I'm good to go. So I'm just going to finish with a knit 1, purl 1, and I am going to slip this and begin my second round here. So you're going to work this 1 by 1 rib for, about an inch or so. Just reference the pattern, what the pattern says, and then you're going to bind off. So I'll see you back here when it's time to bind off. When you've completed the ribbing to the length you're supposed to complete it to, in this case it's about an inch, I did a little bit under, then it's time to bind off in 1 by 1 rib again. So we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. Just make sure, knit 1, purl 1, slip that stitch over. Just make sure when you bind off for the neckline here, you're binding off pretty loosely so you have enough room to get the collar over your head. So again, this is kind of the straightforward bind off. There's many different ways to bind off. There are ways to bind off that are a little bit stretchier, but just make sure you're binding off loose enough so that you can get this over your head. Almost done with the color ribbing here. I've got one stitch left now. I am going to cut a tail, pull that yarn through, take off my stitch marker, drop the needle, take my tapestry needle, weave the tail through. Now I'm going to connect the first stitch to the last stitch here by just kind of weaving it through carefully. And then I will weave my ends in by going up one of the bars here on the side. Pull this through. Snip the yarn. And now we have our color done. And if you have a slight gap here where you join the yarn before, we can weave this in and tighten it up when we weave in all of our ends later. So now it's going to be time to knit the sleeves. I have the stitch marker marked for the top of the shoulder here, and I'm going to place another stitch marker here. I have this marked in the pattern. If you follow along the pattern, you should have had the stitch marker already marked here. It's just the end of where we finished the shoulder increases here. So basically I want to make sure that we have stitch markers marking that section where we had straight stockinette stitch at the top when we picked up for the shoulder, and this just marks where the top of the shoulder is. And this will help us when we're doing our German short row shaping to shape the top of the sleeve cap here. We will be working German short rows on the outside of these stitch markers. So we're going to start picking up stitches using, I'm going to use 16-inch 4mm knitting needles. If you're knitting some of the larger sizes, 24-inch needles will probably work. I am just going to start by using 16-inch needles. So as we pick up, we're going to pick up the same way all of the way around. We're working perpendicularly to the stitches, so we're going to be picking up 3 stitches for every 4 rows all of the way around, except for whatever we cast on. We'll pick up both stitches, or however many stitches you cast on at the bottom. So you're going to want to make sure you have 2 regular stitch markers, because as we work to pick up stitches, where we have these stitch markers, we're going to place stitch markers actually on our needle. So when we start working the short rows, we'll slip those markers and know exactly where we are. I'm actually going to have 3 different color stitch markers handy, one to note the beginning of round, and then one to denote those 2 stitch markers at the top. And I think it might be good just to have them to be 2 different colors, just to be able to keep track of them a little bit better. So we're going to start at, I'm going to work the right sleeve. It doesn't matter which one you start with. In either case, you're going to be starting at the bottom of the at the underarm. So you're going to start on the side here, and we're going to pick up stitches the same way, inserting our needle through that very last stitch. I'm going to grab my tail here, and I am going to pull up my first stitch. So again, pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows. So I'm going to skip a row now. 1, 2, skip a row, 3. 1, 2, skip a row, 3. And I'm going to work all the way up until I get to that first stitch marker, and then I'll show you what to do. Okay, I've picked up stitches along the back here, 3 stitches for every 4 rows. I've worked to the top of the shoulder here, and now I'm gonna just place one of my stitch markers here at the same spot where I have my removable stitch marker. I can actually remove the stitch marker now. Now I know this is the top of the sleeve here, and then now I'm just gonna continue picking up 3 stitches for every 4 rows here. 1, 2, skip a row, 3, all the way to this second stitch marker. Okay, I've worked up until that second stitch marker, so I am going to remove this, and I'm going to actually go into that stitch, place the second stitch marker here, and then just continue picking up a stitch for every 3 stitches for every 4 rows, all the way down to the bottom, all the way down to the underarm here. Okay, when you work all the way around and you've picked up all the stitches, you've got your stitch markers here at the top to denote the top of the shoulders, and all that's left is picking up the stitches that you cast on. I cast on 2 stitches at the underarm, so I'm going to pick up 1. I'm going to place my stitch marker to denote the beginning of round marker. I'm going to pick up my second stitch here, and then I'm going to join the work in the round here. And to join the work in the round, I'm going to get my stitches slid up here. I am going to, this is typically how I join the work in the round. You're going to have a tail and it's going to be loose and you're going to have a little bit of a hole. You can just sew up any gaps at the end, but I usually just slide that first stitch over onto the right hand needle, slip that last stitch over the stitch I just slipped, and then I twist that stitch, and then I'm going to pull my tail here. It's a little wonky. Okay. So I've joined in the round and now I am ready to knit. Now we are going to start the German short row shaping. So once we've joined in the round, you're going to be working short rows to shape the cap sleeve. So I'm going to show you how to use the German short row method. If you want to use the wrap and turn method or any other method, feel free. The concept will still be the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit to the first stitch past the second marker. Okay, so that means we're going to knit to the first stitch past the second marker. So this is the first marker, this is the second marker, and this is the third marker, the beginning of round marker. So we are going to knit all the way to 1 stitch past this second stitch marker, which will be all the way over here. So I'm going to do that now. All right, I'm coming up on my markers here, okay? First marker, second marker. So I'm going to knit past 1 stitch past that second marker. So I just slipped the first marker. I'm going to knit the sleeve, the top of the sleeve stitches. Coming up to the second stitch marker. So it says to knit 1 stitch past. So I'm going to slip the stitch marker. I'm going to knit this next stitch. Okay, now we're working the German short row into this stitch. So to work our first German short row, we actually work the stitch, turn the work, make sure our yarn is in front. We slip this stitch back over to the right hand needle, pull this yarn up so it creates this double stitch look. We're going to put the yarn in front now to purl back. So we've got this double stitch. Now we're going to purl one stitch past the second marker. So we slip this stitch, 1, 2, you purl now all the way to one stitch past the second marker. We've already slipped the first marker. I'm working up to that second stitch marker. I'm going to slip the stitch marker, work the next stitch, purl this stitch. Now I'm going to work the German short row on the wrong side of the work. So I work the stitch, turn the work, make sure my yarn is in front. I slip this stitch, pull this stitch up and over. My yarn should be in the back now so that I can knit. So I'm going to knit to the second marker. I'm going to knit all the way up to the second marker. Okay, I'm working up to the second marker. Now it says, so we're going to slip the marker. Now it says to knit 2 stitches past, so we slip the marker, we're going to knit 2 stitches past the previous German short row. So here's our German short row. So we're going to work this stitch. We're going to work the German short row stitch. Pay attention, you treat this double stitch as if it were one stitch. So we've worked our German short row. Now we're going to work 2 stitches, 1, 2, and now we're working our next German short row. So we work the stitch, turn the work, make sure our yarn is in front, slip the stitch back over to the right hand needle, pull the yarn up and around, bring the yarn in front so we can purl back now. Okay, so now we're just working back and forth, creating short rows so that we have 2 stitches in between each short row. So I'm going to purl. Okay, I've purled all the way back up to that second stitch marker. I'm going to slip the stitch marker. I'm going to find my last German short row stitch, which you'll be able to identify by the double stitch. So I'm going to work that actual German short row. And then the instructions say to work 2 stitches past that. So 1, 2. And then we're going to work the German short row into the next stitch. So I work the stitch, turn my work, make sure my yarn is in front, slip the stitch, pull the yarn up and over, and I continue doing the same thing now. Work back to that stitch marker, and now I can identify where my German short row stitch is, right here. So I'm going to work that stitch, work 2 stitches, and then work the German short row here. So you can see we're creating these short rows now to create this sleeve cap. So you'll be repeating, and the way the pattern is written, you will repeat that row 3 and 4 a certain number of more times. So you should have the same number of short rows on either side of the stitch marker. So I'm going to work until I get to my next German short row right here. I'm going to treat that double stitch as if it were one. I'm going to work that stitch, German short row stitch, knit 2, and then I German short row into this stitch. So I work it, turn it, make sure my yarn's in front, slip that stitch back, pull the yarn over, bring it in front, so now I can purl back. And so we just keep repeating that. So we have until we have the correct number of German short rows completed. So you're just working on and working out from either side of those stitch markers, denoting that top of the shoulder. So you complete your first German short row really close to these stitches, and then you'll keep working out and going back and forth, working out as you go a certain number of times. You can continue working the short rows until you get to the end. The front sleeve has more stitches than the back sleeve, so just keep that in mind. You have more stitches in the front of the sleeve than you do in the back. So I'll see you back here when I've completed the number of short rows I am supposed to complete for my sleeve size. I just wanted to mention a few things as you continue to do the short rows for the sleeve, because it can be a little bit tricky. Everybody picks up a different number of stitches. So instead of specifying total stitch count for sleeves, I just told you to pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows. But this can, because everybody might have a little bit different stitches that they picked up, it does create a little bit of difficulty estimating how many short rows to do. So before you hit the beginning of round markers. Like I said, we're working short rows and we're continuing to work out as we get to the beginning of round marker. For my size, you complete rows 1 and 2 for the short rows, which gives you 1 German short row on either side. When you finish rows 3 and 4, it gives you another German short row on either side. So after you complete rows 1 through 4, you'll have 2 German short rows outside of the stitch markers. And then it'll tell you to repeat it, 10, 11, 12, 13 times more. So if it tells you to repeat it 11 times more, that's a total of 13 German short rows on either side of the sleeve cap at the top here, the top of the shoulder. You might not have picked up enough stitches to get those total number of German short rows, but the goal is to get as close as possible as you continue to work out to that beginning of round marker. So there is my last German short row. I'm supposed to complete 2 more. So if I count this one, then skip 2 stitches, I'm supposed to complete a German short row here. And then I got really lucky. It just so happens I'm supposed to complete my last German short row in the stitch closest to the stitch marker. Make sure you are taking into account how many German short rows you have left. And remember, the back stitches are less than the front stitches. So as you work around, look at the back stitches and see how close you can get to that beginning of round marker. You might not be able to complete all of the German short rows. That's okay. The goal is just to get as close as you can, maintaining the 2 stitches in between. So if you can't get them all in, that's all right. So I'm going to be able to get them all in. So there's my last German short row. I'm going to come back, do this German short row, and then finish that one. All right, so I'll see you back here just as I'm completing this last German short row. And if you can't complete all them, that's fine. Let's say this is my last German short row. You're going to want to make sure you're ending after a row 4, which is completing a German short row, starting on the wrong side and turning the work so you're on the right side. So just wanted to make sure you know that, so you can keep that in mind. Okay, so I am working my last German short row here on the wrong side. And then I'm going to work the next 2 stitches and do my final German short row. Okay, I'm going to work my last German short row. So I work the stitch. I'm going to turn the work. I'm also going to pull the tail. Here I'm going to slip this stitch back over, pull this up, and now I'm just going to knit all the way around to the beginning of round marker on the right side. So we just finished a row 4, and then it says to knit to the beginning of round marker. So I'm just going to knit all the way across to the beginning of round marker. Again, just want to give you the big picture. So we have done short rows all the way out to the beginning of the round marker on the back. So again, the back stitches, the sleeve stitches that we've picked up along the back are less than the number of stitches we've picked up in the front. The front is actually longer than the back on either side of the sleeve at the top of the shoulders here. So just keep that in mind. So it's not an exact science with the number of stitches you've picked up. I've given an estimate in the pattern, but basically just work German short rows as much as you can, keeping the 2 stitches in between each German short row, working all the way out to the beginning of round marker. And then once you're done, you turn the work and you knit to the beginning of round marker. All right, I've knit to the beginning of round marker, and now We are going to complete stockinette stitch for 1.5 inches from the underarm, and you measure that from the underarms right here. I'm just knitting my last German short row here. Okay, so now we're gonna knit stockinette stitch for 1.5 inches, and that is measured from the underarm. So from right here. And again, this might look a little wonky. The underarm here will just close up any gaps with our tail down here. So you're just gonna knit every round until the sleeve measures 1.5 inches from the underarm, from where you cast on right here. Once you've worked 1.5 inches from the underarm, you're gonna start the ribbing for the sleeve, and you're gonna wanna switch to the smaller needle. I'll just show you how I switch to the smaller needle. You just start working the rib, working off of the larger needle onto the smaller needle. So I'm just going to continue this all the way around. So I'm almost done knitting off of the larger needles onto the smaller needles. Wanted to mention, I did luck out. I do have an even number of stitches. If you, for some reason, don't have an even number of stitches to evenly do 1 by 1 rib, you can just purl 2 together the last 2 stitches to make the stitches even. And you can just make sure your work is spread out across the needles, get your beginning of round marker back on, and just continue the 1 by 1 rib now on the smaller needles. So you're going to work the 1 by 1 rib for a total of 8 rounds, and then bind off on the 8th round. You're going to bind off the exact same way you have been for the collar and for the body ribbing. So I'm not going to show you how to do that all again, but just complete 8 rounds and then bind off in 1 by 1 rib. And take your tapestry needle and connect the first stitch and last stitch and weave in your ends. And when you're done knitting this sleeve, you will do the same thing for the second sleeve, starting at the bottom to pick up stitches, work your way around the front. This is for the left sleeve, and then down the back, and you'll complete the same number. You'll try to pick up the same number of stitches, so you'll end up with the same number of German short rows, so the sleeves will be even. Okay, so I have finished both sleeves now. I'm gonna weave in ends. Just one thing to note on the sleeve, it's not an exact science with how many stitches you pick up, but just do your best to try to make both sleeves as identical as possible. Trying to pick up the same amount of stitches on the front side and on the back, just so that when you do the short row shaping, the sleeves, you'll have the same amount of stitches on either side. So, now's the time to just weave in ends. And I did show you how to join yarn, so you can go back. Also, if you have any holes at the underarms, now is a good time to seam those guys up. I've got a bit of a hole here, so I'll probably just take my tapestry needle, weave in my end here, and then just kind of follow the stitches around here to close up any armhole gap. Don't want to pull it too tight, but I'm just going to go around just so that I close up any gaps at the underarm. And you might have a bit of a gap. Sometimes I get this gap here at the corner. This is where we joined the yarn on the right side at the neckline. You can also kind of do that same thing and weave in your ends at the neckline just to tighten that up a little bit. But just go through, weave in your ends, cut the yarn, and you will have a nice sweater. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Hope you love the sweater. Feel free to make the sweater longer, make it in different sizes for a different kind of fit. I've made a couple different sizes, one a bit looser, one a bit tighter, but it's a great summer pattern and it would be fun to also do in a wool for winter. Thanks guys for watching the video. I hope you really enjoyed making the sweater. I hope you enjoy wearing your Brightbay tee or gifting it to someone else, and I will see you in the next video tutorial.